Resourceful Designer, Episode 4, Superhero Syndrome and Your Design Business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, he sometimes works in his bathrobe, Mark DeCote.
Welcome, and thank you for joining me today for another episode of Resourceful Designer. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about something that I believe affects all us creative types at one point or another. But before I do that, I want to share one of my favorite resources with you, and that's Domain Brain. Now, this is for web designers. If you're a graphic designer, you probably won't have any use for this. But if you're a web designer, especially if you manage a lot of clients' website, Domain Brain is an app you should check out. Now, unfortunately, it's only available on Macintosh. And I will be honest, I do find the price a little bit steep. It's at $29 US, and I find that a little bit steep for what it does. But I can honestly say that I use this app on a regular basis, and it's helped me so much. Now, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I don't get any payback for mentioning them. It's just one of the resources that I use in my toolbox that I think you might benefit from. So what exactly is Domain Brain? It's a simple way to keep track of all the information you need to run a client's website. You keep track of their login admins, their passwords, IP addresses, FTP sites, mail servers, database information, anything and all things you need to know in order to run and manage a client's website. You keep it all in one easily searchable place. And you can have all your clients listed there, and it's just with the click of a button, all the information is there for you. I find this really easy. When a client phones me up and they're having an issue with their website, I can usually, while I'm talking on the phone, my client is describing the problem, I can fire up Domain Brain, have all the information there, and log into their account before they finish telling me what the problem is. And then I get right to it. They tell me the problem, and I says, well, I'm in your site right now, and get to it. And sometimes this amazes my clients because of how fast I can remedy the problem, because by the time they finish explaining it, I'm already in there working on it. So as I said, it is a little bit steep. I find $29 for what it does, but it is an app that I use on a very regular basis. So if it's something you want to check out, go to resourcefuldesigner.com/domainbrainapp. That's all one word, Domain Brain app. And that'll redirect you to their website where you can have a look to see if it's something you'd be interested in. Now, wouldn't it be cool to have superpowers? Now, haven't you ever thought about being able to become invisible, or maybe have super strength, or the ability to fly or to teleport? I myself, I've always wanted the power of telekinesis, to be able to move stuff with your mind. I remember back in high school when I was daydreaming in class, I would look down and imagine somebody's shoes and just daydream about being able to undo their laces and tie their shoes together, and how funny that would be, especially, the kids in class that I didn't really get along with. So yeah, it would be really cool to have some of these superpowers. But that's not what I mean when I say superhero syndrome. And that's the topic of today's episode. Superhero syndrome is a condition that almost all entrepreneurs have. And that's what we are. If we run a design business, whether it's a graphic design business or a web design business, we are entrepreneurs. Or as some, like I like to call myself, a solopreneur, because it's just me. I don't have any employees here with me. It's just me. So I'm a solopreneur. And I believe that creatives, such as us, suffer from superhero syndrome even more than regular entrepreneurs. And what it means is we want to do as much as possible for our business as we can. I mean, it's our business after all. We built it. The business is us. It's not like we have a product we're selling, in which case the business is actually the product and you're just running the business. In our cases, we are the business. People are coming to hire us because of who we are. And because of that, we want to wear all the hats in our business. But the problem is when we do wear all the hats, it's much easier for us to burn out. And that's why those with superhero syndrome have to learn to let go of some of the business and hand it off to others. I mean, even superheroes had sidekicks. Batman had Robin, Captain America had Bucky, As business owners, as entrepreneurs, we need to learn how to hand off part of our businesses to others. Some of those parts we would hand off temporarily, and some of those parts we might want to hand off permanently. Now, I'm not talking about hiring people. I'm not telling you to grow your business and get a bigger staff and become an agency. What I'm talking about is finding people to work with. Now, what are the symptoms of superhero syndrome? Well, one thing is, anytime there's something to do, you think that I'll save money if I can do it myself. And I know I'm guilty of doing this. Another symptom is, if there's something that has to be done and you don't know how to do it, you take it upon yourself to learn how to do it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not always the right thing. And I'm going to touch on this in a future episode about learning stuff on the go, but that's for another time. Another symptom of superhero syndrome is you think that your ideas and concepts are far better than anyone else's. Let me give you a little case study of superhero syndrome. Back several years ago, my local library contacted me because they had heard nothing but good things about me. And actually, one of the people on staff I had done a job for years before. So he recommended me to redesign their website. At the time, the library had a very nice website, but it wasn't connected to their book database, which, being a library, was kind of useless. They did have a database and an interface in-house where if you were there, you can look up your books and it would tell you where in the library to find them. But you couldn't do it from home through their website. And they wanted to do that. They wanted to get up with the times and have a website that incorporated their entire catalog. Now, I was flattered that they thought to me, and it wasn't a request for proposal or anything. They came directly to me and they were ready to hand me the job. And when they told me their budget, this would have been the biggest job that I had ever taken on. The problem was, I didn't know how to do that. At that time, I had only really built static websites. I wasn't into dynamic websites yet. Now, instead of telling them right off the bat that I can't do it, or of thinking of hiring somebody to do it for me or work with me, I told them to give me a couple of weeks while I look into things and I would get back to them. And what I did is I went home and I immediately started trying to learn PHP and MySQL because I figured those were the languages which I didn't know how to do at the time. Those were the languages I was going to need in order to build this website. I was suffering from superhero syndrome. I knew that I could hire somebody else to do this, but I was trying to save money. They told me what their budget was, and I thought I can get all this money for myself if I do the job myself. I didn't know how to do PHP and MySQL, so I took it upon myself to do a crash course and try to learn how to do it so that I can build the website. And this was my downfall. It ended up that after several weeks of me trying to learn, for some reason, even though HTML and CSS came second nature to me when I first learned them, I was having a hard time racking my brain around PHP and MySQL. I was able to do some basic concepts, but nothing like what I would need to access this library's catalog database and build it into their website. And what happened next, I still kick myself in the butt each time I think about it, is I ended up turning to the library, thanking them for the opportunity, but telling them that I couldn't handle this job. It was beyond me. And I let it go, and they hired somebody else to do it. Now, at the time, I thought to myself, I tried, but I just wasn't the right person. It wasn't a job for me. Now, thinking back, I realize the opportunities I missed on that job. And if the library was to come to me today, I wouldn't hesitate on taking that job, even though my skills on PHP and MySQL have not really improved that much since then. And that's because I've learned that as part of running a business, it's not just having the skills and being able to use those skills. It's also knowing when you don't have the skills and finding people that do to help you out. Now, that's a hard thing to grasp when you're a designer, when you're a creative person, because as I said earlier, people are hiring us for us. They want our ability. Nobody wants to come and hire me for my graphic design skills and have me give the job to somebody else for them to design. What's the point? Now, that might be something if they're going to a larger agency, because sometimes they don't know what designer is going to work on the case. They're hiring the agency as a whole. But in the case of a solopreneur, when they come to you, hiring you to do the job, they expect you to do the job. But the thing to grasp is you are doing the job. You might not just be the one physically working on it. So what are some of the things that in your business you could hire out? Well, in my case, illustrations. I can draw, but I'm not that good at it. It's not a skill that I practice. So when I need to draw something, it takes me a long time and I'm never satisfied. It doesn't come naturally to me. Now, there was a time when I first started that if somebody came to me and said they had a project and they needed drawings, I would tell them that I'm not the person, and I would tell them they had to either supply me with the drawings and I would work with them, or that they would have to find another designer that could draw as well. Well, I no longer do that. Now I know that if I have a project that requires illustrations, I just hire out an illustrator to do the job. I'm still the one working on the project. I'm just designating part of the project to somebody else, and that would be the illustrations. Other things are coding or programming. I mentioned PHP and MySQL. Well, even though I did learn some of it, I realized that it wasn't my forte. I didn't want to be doing the programming. I'm a designer. I wanted to design the look of the site. I didn't need to be designing all that other stuff or coding all that other stuff behind the scenes. So I learned that hiring somebody, a developer or a programmer, somebody that can do that for me is much more beneficial. Yes, I don't get all the money myself, but the job gets done much faster. I'll tell you another little story. I have a client who came to me because he wanted an e-commerce store. Now, an e-commerce store was something I had never done before, but I was ready to tackle it because of superhero syndrome. It was something I was going to do, I was going to learn. So I reached out to my hosting provider where I keep my clients' websites, and I asked them for the best options. And they told me of a program called PrestaShop where they install it and you build the website and all that, and it's your e-commerce platform. So I did that. I installed PrestaShop. I built the website, and I have to say I did a pretty good job. It was maybe not the most beautiful website out there, but it was functional. It did the job. My client loved it, and that was great. But what happened is a few months later, my client came back to me and said, I was fooling around with the website doing stuff because, of course, it's an e-commerce site. They need access to the back end, and my client messed something up. Now, I didn't know enough about PrestaShop. I was able to go in and following the instructions, I built the website, but I didn't have the capabilities to go in and troubleshoot what he had done and figure out what was wrong. So what I did is I turned online and I looked for somebody who was a PrestaShop expert. So I turned to a site called Elance. I put my project out there, and I had a few people submit offers on doing the job. Now, I happened to pick somebody because he had really good reviews. He had a high star rating. He had done a lot of jobs, and the comments on his jobs were very positive. So I hired him. Now, he just so happens to be in the Philippines, and he came back and told me that he would have the job fixed. It would take him about 10 hours, which I know would have taken me much, much longer than that. And the price that he was charging me was a fraction of what my going rate is for an hourly rate. So I was able to hand off the project to him. He fixed it within the 10-hour frame that he had said he would. I paid him, and then I turned around and I was able to charge my client more. Now, I didn't charge him for the full 10 hours, although I could have at my rate, but I still made some money because the problem was fixed and the client was willing to pay stuff. So I was able to bill a marked up rate on what I had paid this developer to do, and the job got fixed within a reasonable time frame, something I couldn't have handled on my own. So that's another case where hiring somebody out helps your business. Other things, bookkeeping. I mean, we're designers. We don't want to be doing bookkeeping, accounting, taxes, that stuff that, yes, you could. And when I first started in business, I was doing that on my own because I didn't want to pay an accountant to do my stuff. It was pretty simple. It was just me doing things. But then I quickly learned that the hours and the time it took me to do it, I was much better off just sending this off to somebody and then signing the paperwork once it was done. Now, in some cases, if you're a graphic designer and you don't do web, or if you're a web designer and you don't do print, sometimes you might want somebody to hire out to do that. If you have a client that comes in and they ask you to design a website, and then they say, well, I'd like to have some sort of flyer or something to promote my website, and you don't do print design, instead of telling your client, no, I don't do that, you can tell your client, yes, I can handle that, and then find a graphic designer to design the flyer for you. And you just work as the go-between. And you still make money on the project. So all those menial tasks are stuff that you're not capable of doing or stuff you don't do. So why should you hire out? Well, some of the reasons are it expands your business capabilities. It expands your perceived expertise. If you're a graphic designer and you don't do websites, but you have somebody that can do websites for you, when somebody comes to you, you look a lot more impressive as somebody that can do both print and web, even though you don't handle the web part yourself. And that's something you could tell your client, or you might not need to tell your client. Same thing with illustrations. If you're not an illustrator and you hire that part out, your client might be grateful because they don't want to go through the trouble of trying to find somebody to do their illustrations. They come to you because you're the expert. And again, you might not be the one doing the actual drawing, but they view it as somebody part of your team. And part of your team doesn't have to be somebody on staff. Another reason you should hire out is you can actually make more money this way. You're offering services that you wouldn't normally offer. In some cases, you can mark up the projects that you hire out and you can make money off of them, even though you never laid a finger on them. And the other reason you should hire out is it frees up your time. Instead of you trying to spend the time learning how to do stuff or drudging through something that you're not very good at, if you pay somebody else to do it, that means you're not doing it and you can use that time to work on things you are good at and make more money in your business. Now, there's a great book called Virtual Freedom by Chris Ducker, and it talks about how to work with virtual staff. And that's people that are not necessarily part of your business, but help you run your business. Now, virtual staff could be somebody that you hire on a regular basis and they'll work 4 hours a week for you, maybe doing your bookkeeping or whatever. Or virtual staff could be somebody you hire on a one-off project. You need somebody to do a series of illustrations in a specific style, which is not something you need on a regular basis. So you hire them for this one-off project. Now, in Chris's book, Virtual Freedom, he talks about the 3 lists of freedom exercise to help you understand what we should do ourselves and what we should hand off to others. And in this, his exercise is to take a sheet of paper and draw 3 columns on it. Now, in the first column, you list all the jobs or tasks you do in your business that you don't like doing. Examples of that are collecting your taxes or taking care of your yearly taxes, collections, going after clients that are not paying their bills, invoicing, taking care of all that stuff. There's also project research, which in some cases, when you're a designer and you're going to design something, yes, you want to research your client as much as possible to get to know them. But sometimes there's a project that requires research that really has nothing to do with the design. I had a client once who had come up with a product that would help seniors who ride around in those little motorized scooters. Now, when he hired me, part of the project included getting the addresses to every senior's residence in the province of Ontario here in Canada. Now, that was a big task, and it would require many hours of Googling and finding the addresses and all this stuff. So I found somebody online that was willing to do it, and I gladly paid them because I didn't want to spend that time. My client didn't want to do it, so they were hiring me to do it as part of the overall project. I was designing the website for them. I was designing the packaging for their product. I was designing their marketing pieces. But as part of that, he wanted me to get the addresses where he would be able to mail these marketing pieces. And I didn't want to spend hours in front of the computer trying to get the addresses and the names of every senior's residence in the province of Ontario. So as I said, I hired somebody to do that. It took them a couple of days and they gave me a list. I don't remember. There was a few hundred places on it with addresses and contact names and all sorts of stuff. And I gladly paid somebody to do that because that was definitely a task I did not want to do. So that's something to include in the first column on the sheet. In the second column on the sheet, you list all the jobs and tasks that you can't do, or at least can't do very well. In my case, that's PHP and MySQL. I can do it, I'm just not very good at it. And it would take me an hour or so to do the same task that somebody else could probably do in 5 minutes. So that's a task I can't do. So any jobs or projects that fall in that category get put in this column. This column also includes things that you like to dabble at, but that are outside your area of expertise. Now, in the third column, you should list the jobs or tasks that you should not be doing. These are things you're not very skilled at. You may know how to do them, but you're not good at them. In my case, photography. I love taking pictures. When I took my design course back in college, part of the course included photography. All 3 years we had photography classes. In fact, when I graduated, not only did I get a diploma for graphic design, I also received a certificate saying that I was a quote-unquote certified photographer. I don't really know what that means, but I do have a certificate to show it. And even though I never lost my love for taking pictures, it's not something I practice on a regular basis. So when it comes to photography, it's something I should not be doing for my business. my clients would be much better served by me hiring a professional photographer that had the proper equipment, the proper lighting, the proper know-how, and the skills that they've developed over the years to take the photos that I might not be able to capture. So that's what you put in the third column, the things that you're not very skilled at. You may know how to do them, but you're not good at them. And then once you have these 3 columns filled out, then you figure out how to get rid of these from your daily routines. Some of them may be tough, especially the ones you like doing. And it's hard to admit to yourself that something you like doing is something you shouldn't really be doing. It doesn't benefit your business. So you have to take a hard, long look at that and really figure out if it helps your bottom line by you doing it. So now that you have your list and you've figured out what parts of your business that you shouldn't be doing, that you can't do, or that are just outside your area of expertise, what do you do next? Well, you have to find somebody to do those jobs for you, somebody you can work with either on a semi-regular or maybe on a one-time basis. Now, there's all sorts of great resources out there. Sometimes you could find people locally. I've contacted universities and colleges sometimes when I had menial tasks to do in design. And there's always a graphic design student or a web design student that would love to have something to put on their resume that they actually worked on a real client project. So in some cases, you can hire stuff out to them. I did a catalog once for a client and they had 300 plus photos and they wanted the backgrounds of the photos to all be a uniform color. Somehow the photographer who had isolated, the photos were supposed to be isolated on a white background, but I don't know if the lighting didn't work out or whatever, or maybe they cut corners and didn't hire the right photographer and tried to do the job themselves. Maybe they were suffering from superhero syndrome. But the photos they gave me, the individual products were nice and clear, but the white background wasn't always white. Sometimes it was grayed, there were shadows and stuff. So they asked me to clean up all the photos so that they would have a uniform background. Now, that's something I could have done, but it was something I really had no desire to do. So I contacted one of the design schools nearby, and I asked, is there any of the students that would like to take this on? And believe me, it didn't take me long to get a response. Now, I could have done this as some sort of internship, but no, I decided I wanted to pay this person for their time. I believe their time spent was worth it, and I paid them good money to do this. Did I pay them what I would have charged my client for me doing it? No. And this person was a design student, but I paid them well enough that they were very happy to do the job. And I was very happy that I didn't have to do that job. And then I, in turn, charged my client for doing that service. And I made some money off of it. And in the end, all 3 of us were happy. The student, my client, and myself. So that's one source. You can go to schools. You can look for other people in your area. I mean, if you're a graphic designer, reach out to web designers in your area and see if you can partner up with them. And if you end up getting a web project, would they be willing to work on it? Or vice versa. If you're a web designer and sometimes your clients might ask you for something simple as a business card or a flyer, maybe you can partner up with a graphic designer that can do that part for you. Now, if you do have a hard time finding somebody locally or you don't know somebody that can refer somebody else, there are online resources for hiring out. One popular one is Fiverr.com. That's Fiverr. There's 2 R's on it. And that's a website where people will do tasks for you for $5 a shot. Now, the odd time, depending on it might cost more. But I've had people on Fiverr, I've hired people to do simple illustrations for something. As I mentioned before, I'm not really an illustrator. And I do know some illustrators that'll do good stuff. But sometimes you just need a simple drawing and you can't find something on one of those stock sites. So I've turned to Fiverr.com before and hired somebody to just do a little quick drawing. And sometimes I'll just ask for a black and white and I can easily color it myself in Photoshop. But I'll pay somebody $5 for that and then move on with the project. Now on something a little bit more in depth, as I mentioned before, I would hire somebody on Elance. There was also Odesk. Now the 2 of them have now merged and it's a new website called Upwork at upwork.com. Now, I haven't used them since they've merged. It's been a little while since I've hired somebody, and I never used Odesk. It was always on Elance I went, even though they were working together. At one point, I know they were separate sites, but then they joined. But I always went to Elance because that's where I had originally set up my account. And on Elance, mostly I would hire people for web whenever I needed a specific thing done. If I needed some work done on a WordPress theme that I didn't want to work on or found it a little bit difficult because my knowledge wasn't where it had to be, or in the case of the PrestaShop, as I said, or any aspect. There's a few times I've hired somebody on Elance to do a specific project. And there's been a couple of people that I've gone back to afterwards and said, I've got a new project. Would you be willing to work on it? And sometimes it works out. And there's some wonderful people out there. And the amazing thing is some of these people, depending on where they live, their skills are just as good and sometimes even better than those I know locally. But since their cost of living is so low, you can get really good deals. In fact, it's kind of funny because I've hired web developers via Elance at $10 an hour. And I feel guilty paying that low, but when you offer to pay them more, they refuse. There's something about their economy that if they make too much money, it affects them in some way. So they want to make a certain amount and they don't want to accept more money. So they charge me $10 an hour and then I mark that up and I charge my client whatever I want. And the job is done in a way that I wouldn't have been able to myself. So I've got no problems hiring somebody out on Elance or now I'll go to the new Upwork.com the next time I need somebody. Another site you can go to is virtualstafffinder.com, which is the site owned by Chris Ducker, who wrote the Virtual Freedom book that I talked about earlier. Now, I've never used them, but this is a place you would go to hire a VA, a virtual assistant. And this is somebody that might help you with dealing with clients. They might help you with paperwork. They might help you with invoicing. They might help you with research, depending on what your projects are. These are people you can hire and they'll do work 2 hours a week for you, 4 hours a week, 8 hours a week, depending on what you need. And they're just there to free up your time so that you can do the designing part of the job, the stuff that you were actually hired for. Your clients are not hiring you to do the bookkeeping, to do the research, to do all the stuff. They're hiring you for the design, and that's what you should be working on because that's how you build your business. Now, I will say I will never turn to one of those competition sites. I won't even name them on the podcast. But you know what I'm talking about, those sites where you go out, you say you have a job, and then you have a whole bunch of people that send you designs, and you pick the one you like, and that's the person you pay. I am completely against that sort of thing. I think it demeans the whole industry because only one of those designers actually gets paid for his work. All the other designers are working just as hard, but they don't get anything out of it. Now, I know they're the ones that put themselves out on that site, but I refuse to use them. So anyways, that's my take on superhero syndrome. I hope you get something out of it and you realize that you don't have to do everything in your business. You don't have to wear all the hats. There are people out there that can help you. You don't have to turn down jobs like I was doing years ago. You have to remember that people are hiring you for your design skills, whether it's as a web designer or as a graphic designer. They're hiring you for your design skills. How you present them with that finished design is up to you. And if you need to hire somebody out to do part of that, then do it. Everybody wins out in the end. Now, speaking of winning, I put together a free guide that I call the 4-Week Marketing Boost. And this is a guide for you with 20 simple tasks that we all know but sometimes forget about. And they're 20 simple tasks that take anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes per day. And I call it the 4-Week Marketing Boost because there's 20 tasks, and if you do one of them per day, it takes 4 weeks to complete them. And at the end of this, you will have improved your business's image enough so that you create the best possible first impression for new clients coming to you. You've heard it said before, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So you want to put your best image out there. And this 4-Week Marketing Boost guide can help you do that. And it's absolutely free. So if it's something you're interested in, just visit marketingboost.net and get the guide. Now, don't forget to check out Domain Brain at resourcefuldesigner.com/domainbrainapp if that's something you think you might be interested in. Again, I have no affiliation with them. I just think it's a resource that I use on a regular basis. And I think if you're a web designer, it's something you might like. Now, in the next episode of Resourceful Designer, I'm going to talk about your morals and how not to compromise them when dealing with clients. But until then, keep up the great work running your design business. I am Mark Decote, and I'm reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.